Today in the Daily Dose, trails to the American West. After America's successful purchase of the Louisiana Territory from France, a move that doubled the size of the young republic with some 828,000 square miles of largely unexplored, pristine wilderness, President Thomas Jefferson tasked his personal secretary, Meriwether Lewis, with exploring the new lands west of the Mississippi. Lewis chose his good friend William Clark to co-lead the expedition, who in turn recruited and trained unmarried, healthy men at Fort Du Bois during the winter of 1803. On May 14, 1804, the Corps of Discovery, or simply the Corps, as they became known, set out in keelboats down the Missouri River with 45 recruits, a French Indian interpreter, a contracted boat crew, and a slave named York. During their 2-year, 8,000-mile journey to the Pacific Ocean and back, Lewis and Clark encountered nearly 50 Native American tribes, who for the most part remained friendly, thanks to the presence of interpreter Toussaint Charbonneau's wife Sacagawea and her infant son Jean-Baptiste, or Pomp, as Clark nicknamed the boy, who, as he wrote, reconciles all the Indians as to our friendly intention. A woman with a party of men is a token of peace. The coming mass migration of Americans from eastern settlements was further refined by fur trappers and traders who explored the routes that would later become part of the Oregon Trail, while enterprises such as the Hudson's Bay Company and the American Fur Company established trading posts and forts along the future trail, which in turn sparked additional exploration and mapping of potential routes west, adding a critical geographical understanding that proved the feasibility of an overland route to the Oregon Territory and beyond. By the 1820s and 30s, American settlers began to trickle west, thanks to mountain men like Jedediah Smith and Jim Bridger, who discovered passes through seemingly insurmountable obstacles, such as the Rocky Mountains. Early explorers also helped to define other trails heading west, including the California Trail, which branched off at southern Idaho for settlers and later miners headed to the gold fields of the Sierra Nevada mountains, the Mormon Trail, which paralleled much of the Oregon Trail before splitting off at Council Bluffs for Salt Lake City, and after the Civil War, the Bozeman Trail, which ran farther north through the Montana Territory. In 1843, the start of the peak years of westward expansion, America's 10th president, John Tyler, presided over a nation of 18 million citizens who found themselves bogged down in a protracted economic depression. To further press the theme of manifest destiny, Congress offered free Western land for debt-ridden Americans, many taking the bait with little comprehension of the dangers posed by a 2,000-mile overland journey to the American West. We left our comparatively comfortable homes and the uncomfortable creditors for the uncertain and dangerous trip, Catherine Hahn wrote in 1849, beyond which loomed up in our mind's eyes castles of shining gold. Lacking knowledge of the trail ahead, most immigrants put their faith in guidebooks, such as Lansford W. Hastings' The Immigrant's Guide of 1845, where he writes, "The immigrant should provide himself with at least 200 pounds of flour or meal, 150 pounds of bacon, 10 pounds of coffee, 20 pounds of sugar, and 10 pounds of salt." These provisions are considered ample both as to quantity and variety. For the harness, mules are preferred to horses, but oxen are preferred to both. For as a general thing, they continue to thrive throughout the journey. Most guidebooks, however, were poorly researched and oftentimes flat out untruthful, leaving soon-to-be westward-moving pioneers with little idea of what they were about to face. For regardless of the trail a pioneer chose, the journey ahead would be slow and arduous, made worse by a myriad of risks, including dysentery, infectious diseases, highwaymen, Indian attacks, dehydration and malnutrition, cholera, injury, and difficult weather. The majority of westward pioneers traveled in wagon trains made up of prairie schooners, as they were known, while many Mormon immigrants made the crossing to Utah with hand carts, which was the advice of Brigham Young himself. Exposed to a wide range of temperatures common in mountain highlands and high plains, pioneers routinely faced daytime temperatures in the 80s and 90s, while overnight temperatures frequently dropped into the low 40s. Nearly all pioneers faced daily challenges of finding potable water and fuel for fires, which saw each major trail west widen substantially over time, as wagon trains scoured the earth for both limited resources. As for fire, most pioneers were forced to burn buffalo chips for warmth and cooking fuel. Thanks to the popularity of diary writing in the 19th century, many pioneers have left us with a taste of life on the westward trails. "It's 4 a.m., wrote Jesse Applebaum in 1843. "The hours of sleep are over. Every wagon and tent is pouring forth its night's tenants, and slow kindling smoke begins to rise. We rose early at 3 o'clock, started before 6, wrote Sarah Mosley in 1857. Traveled about 11 miles, struck a river at 2 o'clock for dinner, remained 1 hour, started again, traveled 8 miles, in camp for the night. We are now on a big road, and such a road I'd never met," wrote Henry S. Bloom in 1850. "It's from 20 to 60 feet wide and as hard and smooth as a pavement, road full of teams, a perfect jam." In 1854, Charlotte Alice wrote that we have a rather tedious day's ride, passing over some rough roads, and the dust blew hard enough to put our eyes out, while George William Riley Franklin wrote in 1849 that this day's march brought us memories of the joys of the past, spent around our firesides at home, but the cold, disagreeable wind and dust blew in our eyes during the march. "I've just washed the dust out of my eyes so I could see to get supper," an unidentified immigrant wrote in 1853. The spring rains settled the dust, but brought another type of misery. "I've been traveling all afternoon in mud and water up to our hubs, broke chains and stuck in the mud several times." "Men and boys are all wet and muddy," wrote Charlotte Alice in 1854. "The wind so high I thought it would tear the wagon to pieces." Unable to pitch the tent, so all 9 of us crowded into the wagon with wet clothes, wet beds, and no supper. And then rain pouring down in torrents. Horrible are these storms when you have nothing but a little frail tent. Yes, our tent blew down, such a time I never experienced before, but I expect we have not seen the worst yet. We've passed by some 8 or 10 graves today, whose deaths caused by cholera and diarrhea, wrote Judge William Riley Franklin in 1849. Every day's march presents the same striking lesson to our view, and sensations very melancholy steal over our mortal frames when we reflect upon them being deposited so far from home in a dreary, wild, desolate solitude where the wolf howled their regime. Our bosom heaves with pity for humanity. Pioneers also recorded good days on the trail, such as Henry Allen's 1852 diary entry, "We have good roads comparatively." We mean good roads if the sloughs are not belly deep and the hills not right straight up and down and not rock enough to turn the wagon over. While David Maynard records that on September 1st of 1850, started at 4:30 after being up with the team nearly all night. Came on to the good camp at Spring. On our way here at Powder River, we killed a noble salmon, taking breakfast out of him, and a fine dish it was. During Osborne Cross's 1849 crossing, he writes that after passing this morning through the valley in which we encamped last evening, the road brought us to the top of a high ridge, giving us a beautiful view of the mountains running east and west and parallel to the ridge over which we were passing. The sight was very fine, as these mountains were the first we had seen covered with pine since leaving Soda Springs. Of the 3 most traveled trails west, the Oregon Trail was the most widely used, followed by the California and Mormon trails, and a handful of lesser trails traversing northern, central, and southern parts of the American West. Provisioning in either Independence, St. Joseph, or Council Bluffs, Missouri, settlers embarking on the Oregon Trail spent anywhere from $800 to $1,200 on supplies, some $47,000 in today's currency, usually raised through the sale of their possessions in eastern farms. Once a given wagon train had been organized, the first stop was Fort Kearny in present-day Nebraska, where they rested and resupplied for the push to Chimney Rock and Scotts Bluff, which were natural rock formations in western Nebraska that proved crucial for navigating the plains. Next came Fort Laramie in present-day Wyoming, which was a second critical rest and resupply point for westbound immigrants. Known as the Great Register of the Desert, Independence Rock in the Wyoming Territory was next, which was used as a navigational aid, as well as a place to record names and dates as pioneers passed by the navigational landmark. South Pass was next in the Wyoming Territory, which allowed prairie schooners, as they were known, to successfully traverse the Rocky Mountains. Fort Hall in present-day Idaho was another key resupply point for westward immigrants, as well as the jumping-off points for trails leading southwest to California or northwest to Oregon and Washington. For those heading to Oregon, the final segment was the Blue Mountains in the Columbia River, which tested the endurance and determination of many trail-weary pioneers. For those immigrants heading to California or Utah, the California Trail branched off at Fort Hall in present-day Idaho before traversing southwesterly to Sutter's Fort in Mexican-held Alta California, while the Mormon Trail ran from Nauvoo, Illinois to Salt Lake City in the Utah Territory. Other trails included the Santa Fe Trail between St. Louis and Santa Fe in present-day New Mexico, while the old El Camino Real del Tierra Adentro led southward from Santa Fe to Chihuahua by way of El Paso del Norte. Another vital route was the Old Spanish Trail, which led from Santa Fe to Los Angeles. Additional trails were added during the Mexican-American War, such as Cook's Wagon Road, including the Tucson Cutoff, which was built from Santa Fe to San Diego, while the California Gold Rush produced additional traffic flows along the Siskiyou Trail from Oregon to Northern California. For those traveling to Texas, the San Antonio-El Paso Road was developed in 1849, traversing West Texas to El Paso. Other far western routes included the Yuma Crossing to Los Angeles, later renamed the Southern Immigrant Trail, while the goldfields could be reached by two routes heading north from Los Angeles, the old El Camino Viejo and the Stockton-Los Angeles Road, where many herds of cattle and sheep were driven north to the goldfields to feed the hungry ranks of the 49ers. The use of westward trails came to a sudden end after the first transcontinental railroad was put into service on May 10, 1869, dropping a cross-country journey from months and thousands of dollars to a mere week and a couple of $100, opening up the American West to a less rugged diaspora of Americans. Considered one of the grandest accomplishments in world history, connecting the two American coasts also opened a floodgate of exported Western resources into Eastern markets, at the same time accelerating conflicts between Native Americans and the flood of new settlers who now had easy access to the American West. While attacks by Native Americans was a rarity until after South Pass on the Oregon Trail, pioneers on all trails west suffered egregious hardships, leading to the deaths of an estimated 50,000 lives, or 1 out of every 10 immigrants who walked or rode the trails. Most of the deaths were caused by filth diseases, including typhoid and the #1 killer of pioneers, cholera, which was caused by contaminated drinking water. Every immigrant on the trail became accustomed to the presence of death, turning wagon trains into mobile communities that suffered each loss together as they quickly buried their dead before pressing on in the hopes of a better life ahead. Word was passed that a woman had been accidentally run over and killed instantly. Ellen Bailey Lamborn wrote of her 1864 crossing on the Oregon Trail. The woman was getting down from the moving vehicle until her clothing caught on the brake rod and she was thrown forward beneath the wheel. "Past 6 fresh graves," wrote Esther Macmillan Hanna in 1852. "Oh, 'tis a hard thing to die far from friends and home, to be buried in a hastily dug grave without shroud or coffin, the clods filled in and then deserted, perhaps to be food for wolves." Still other losses came from stampeding livestock, attacks by immigrants on other immigrants, lightning, gunpowder explosions, drowning during river crossings, and suicide. Livestock suffered and died in even higher numbers, leaving behind an abundance of bleached livestock bones, which paved the sides of westward trails from Missouri to the Pacific Ocean. If you enjoyed today's Daily Dose and want us to create more documentaries like this one, please give it a thumbs up or a super thanks. If you're aware of a piece of American or military history that is underreported, please comment below because we read every comment and would love to hear which subjects interest you most. To learn more about this subject, consider reading the filmmaker's book Westward Rising Suns, which you can find in the description below.